Hi, so we're continuing on today with the Senufo people, and nearly 1.5 million people are known collectively as Senufo. Village communities are the principal social unit. Each community is divided into distinct residential areas or wards. A single community may contain 2 or 3 wards or groups. And so what I'm showing you here is, again, our area of the Senufo. And I have a link on the bottom here if you want some more information about the Senufo. And the one thing that we want to focus on is that we have these groups called Poro, and these provide the principal framework through how the society is organized. And so men will be in these groups, and then through these groups, they learn how to be a good citizen within the community, and all men belong to these groups. So let's look at some of the artwork that is used. So here are 2 figures, and these are used in ceremonies, and they are usually created in pairs, like I'm showing you here. One is female, one is male, and they represent spirit figures. They're carried within the masquerade, and they're swung back and forth and then pounded on the ground. And this is how they get their name, rhythm pounders. So some interesting things that you'll notice about these 2 figures, and as has been, I think, just about everything I've shown you for this unit or this week, these are carved out of wood. We had a couple of things made out of metal, but the majority of everything is carved out of wood. So here is our female figure, and you can tell this is a female figure because she has breasts, and here is our male figure. And so if you look at these, some interesting things, the female figure is actually larger than the male figure. Although when they're next to each other, because the male figure has a wider base or a bigger base and a thing on the top of his head here, he is taller. But when you look at the figures themselves, she is larger. So they have some very typical things that we've been seeing, which is the very extenuated jawline, right? This we've seen in the Nok and in other, the Dogon and other cultures from this area. They both wear bracelets. They both have the elongated torso, extra long arms, shortened legs. In this case, they both have very broad shoulders also. The faces aren't individualized for one distinct person. They're just generalized so that everyone can make this association with them. The female figure you'll see on her breasts has scarification. And also on her cheek. And the man as well has scarification on his cheek. So scarification is definitely something that we see in this portion of Africa, or this part of Africa. And then the other thing, and I've mentioned this before, is that around the belly button is very important because it's like the symbolic beginning of life for them. And that after a woman gives birth her first time, she has scarification that is put around the belly button, indicating that she has given birth. It's great honor. And so in this case, we also see that. So here we see a representation of, we can think of this as like the ancestral mother, the spiritual mother. And again, this means that it's like this collective idea of motherhood, not an individual mother. We know right away that she's a mother because she's holding a baby on her lap. And she also has very exaggerated stretched breasts to indicate that she is nursing a child, or she has nursed many children. And this is, again, symbolic that it's like the idea of feeding the community and nurturing the community. She has the extenuated jaw. Again, she has a very distinct hat on, again, linking her to like the magical forces, spiritual forces of the afterlife. She also has the typical long neck, long torso, long arms, shortened legs. And then the other thing that's really important to point out here is she's sitting on a stool. So whenever we see in African art a person or a spirit or whatever is sitting on a stool or a chair, it means that they have great power. And in fact, the stools like this we'll get into in the next few weeks. They truly believe that when you sit on a stool and you have like a stool that you sit on, one stool, not many, that stool is like has somehow like your energy go into it, and then it's associated with you, and they're actually often buried with the king, whatever the king's stool was, or a person might have the stool buried with them, but no one else would ever use that stool. And in some communities they actually even turn the stool over when they leave a room so no one else is able to sit on it. The other thing here is that this specific figure is representing, once again, this idea of the poro. So poro, again, is this organization. It's the way the society is organized. And this is representing like the mother that looks out over everyone that is going through the poro. And in fact, at the end of the initiation process, they have a tunnel that the people will go through as though they're being born to indicate that they have successfully achieved this next level within the society. And then we also have the last thing, as I've mentioned before, that scarification is quite common in this area. So again, you see scarification on her chest and scarification on her face. It's an honor to have this. It's meaning that she has power. So we will look at the next image. And what I'm showing you here is metal jewelry, amulets that were made by the Senefo. These come from the early part of the 20th century, and many of them have symbols on them that are making connections to the spiritual world. Just like I was raised Catholic, so I might wear a cross. My husband's actually Jewish, so he might wear a Star of David, something like that. You know, we make these connections symbolically, and in this case, these often will have animals in the Senefo that are representing different spirits, and so we will have them represented in the jewelry that the people are wearing. These will include motifs like the chameleon, the turtle, the crocodile, snake, birds, and other quadrupeds, other animals that have 4 legs. The most interesting thing to point out here is that these are made with a process called lost wax. And we will be looking at this in the next couple weeks. So keep coming back to this. Lost wax technique is the hardest and most complicated way to create metal objects. And many people thought that the Greeks were the only people that invented this, and that we have then learned from the Greeks, and this tradition has gone on today to use lost wax casting. However, we now know that it was independently, I'll say that again, independently invented in West Africa and also invented in Asia. So for many years, people thought that the argument was made that the lost wax objects that came from West Africa were, this technique of casting was known because there must have been a Greek colony there, and that is how these people learned this technique. Again, this is, Eurocentric, saying that Europeans are better than Africans and that nobody from West Africa could, have figured this out. But now we know that it was independent, that they did figure it out. And in fact, the technique of casting, although it's very similar, there are some big differences in the way that they do the casting. And we'll come back to this in the next few weeks. as we look at other civilizations from this area that used lost wax casting. So the next thing I'm showing you here is a helmet mask. And again, a helmet mask is a mask that's going to sit on the head completely and then rest on your shoulders. And then from there, you're going to have cloth or raffia or something like that that covers the rest of your body. I'll also say, like many of the objects that we look at in African art, this is not one animal. This is a combination of animals. And in that way, it's a symbolic animal that is making a reference to the spiritual world. This comes to us from the 19th to the mid 20th century, and this is still, we're still working or talking about the centerfold. And if we see like three things that you might notice about this work, one that, you know, it's made once again out of multiple animals. It's still carved out of wood, and it's particularly this type of mask that goes over your entire head. Those are like three really easy things. So what is this? Well, I don't know for sure, but I know that I mentioned before that like the antelope is really important for the Dogon. So we may make a connection like this is the antelope or some other kind of animal like that that has horns. We also have tusks like, warthog or something. And then the mouth might be like a crocodile, or oddly to me, it looks almost like a dragon. But that usually, we don't see dragons in African art. So probably a crocodile. So then on the back of the head is perhaps a monkey or a bird. But the idea is it's supposed to be open for interpretation. That again, these are like combinations of animals. Which this actually shows like this much higher thinking that we're making these spiritual connections of something that does not exist, but showing it in this way to give it some kind of visualization. Something in African art I find really, really interesting. And what kind of feeling might you get from this? I personally find this a bit scary. I think this is a scary mask, and I'm sure if it was danced and in some kind of thing with drums and everything, I would kind of find it scary. The other thing to show you is this, and see here you see how the entire body is covered with cloth, and these are double helmet masks so that there's a face on either side, so the person can go back and forth like this to activate both of the masks. I'm going to stop it here because we're going to run out of time, and I'll pick it up, and I think I'll make one more video for this week.